When my firefighter husband sent the only ladder truck to his ex-girlfriend, our 8-year-old daughter and I were trapped above a fire that had already swallowed the stairwell below us. He knew exactly where we were. He had heard my voice over the emergency radio. He knew I was on the roof of the old Mercer building with our daughter, Lily, and 5 other people. He knew Lily had started coughing. He knew the roof door had locked behind us and that smoke was pushing through the ventilation housing less than 20 feet away. The dispatcher told him the aerial ladder was 4 minutes out and should come to the north side where we were waiting. Then Olivia called his name from a third-floor balcony on the south side. She was crying so hard that people on the street could hear her. My husband Daniel looked at the 2 sides of the building, lifted his radio and said, "Send ladder 7 to the south balcony first." The dispatcher answered immediately. "Chief, north roof has a child and multiple occupants. South balcony has 1 ambulatory adult with an interior team approaching." "Confirm reassignment." Daniel did not hesitate. "Confirmed. Get Olivia off that balcony." I heard every word through the radio clipped to the belt of the maintenance supervisor standing beside me. Lily looked up at me and asked, "Why is Dad sending the ladder over there?" I did not know how to answer her. 8 minutes later, the smoke reached the roof. 12 minutes later, Lily stopped responding when I said her name. "My name is Rachel Miller. I was 35 years old when this happened. I worked as a fire protection engineer for a commercial architecture firm in Portland, Oregon. I spent my days reviewing evacuation routes, smoke control systems, alarms, sprinklers, and the 1,000 quiet details most people never notice until a building is on fire. Daniel had been a firefighter for 16 years. He was 40, a battalion chief, and one of the people the city trusted to make calm decisions when everyone else was panicking. That was part of what I loved about him. When we first met, he was standing in the parking lot of a burned elementary school at 6 in the morning, drinking coffee that had gone cold. I was 27 and had been sent by an insurance company to help determine why smoke had spread into a supposedly protected hallway. Daniel had been awake all night. His face was covered in soot. He still walked me through the building 3 times because I kept asking questions. At the end of the inspection, I told him the self-closing fire door had been wedged open for months. He said, "So the $5 piece of wood under the door mattered more than the $1 million alarm system. Most disasters are built out of small decisions," I said. He smiled. "That sounds depressing. It's useful. If small decisions can cause a disaster, small decisions can prevent one too." He asked me to have dinner with him the next week. We got married 3 years later. Lily was born 2 years after that. For most of our marriage, Daniel was a good father. I need to say that because it is true. He taught Lily how to ride a bicycle. He knew she hated bananas but loved banana bread. When she had pneumonia at 5, he slept on the floor beside her bed for 4 nights because she was afraid to wake up alone. He was good to me in many ways, too. When my father died, Daniel handled every phone call I could not make. When I studied for my professional engineering exam, he taped handwritten questions to the refrigerator and tested me while we cooked dinner. On mornings after his night shifts, he sometimes drove across town just to bring me coffee before going home to sleep. If our marriage had been entirely bad, I would not have stayed for 9 years. The problem was not that Daniel did not love us. The problem was that there was one promise he believed came before every other promise he had made. That promise belonged to Olivia Reed. Olivia had dated Daniel in his 20s. Her older brother, Nolan, had been Daniel's closest friend at the fire academy. 11 years before the Mercer building fire, Daniel and Nolan responded to a warehouse fire on the east side of the city. Part of the roof collapsed while they were inside. Daniel was knocked unconscious. Nolan dragged him behind a concrete partition, shared the last of his air, and stayed with him until another crew broke through the wall. Nolan did not make it out. Daniel did at the hospital. Daniel promised Nolan's mother that he would always look out for Olivia. Unlike the stories people sometimes tell themselves to justify old loyalties, this debt was real. Nolan truly had saved Daniel's life. Olivia truly had lost her brother. Daniel truly carried guilt that most people could never understand. When Daniel told me the story early in our relationship, I cried. I told him, of course you should be there for her. I meant it. I just did not understand that in Daniel's mind, being there for Olivia had no limit. The first time he left me for her, we had been dating for less than a year. Olivia called at midnight because the carbon monoxide alarm in her apartment was chirping. Daniel drove 40 minutes to check it. The battery was low. I thought it was excessive, but also kind. After we married, Olivia called because a contractor made her uncomfortable. Daniel left Lily's preschool concert before her class went on stage. He said he would be back in 20 minutes. He missed the entire thing. Olivia called after a man followed her through a parking garage. Daniel went with her to file a police report. That made sense. She called because her basement smelled like smoke. It was dust burning off an old furnace. That also made sense. Then she called during our 7th wedding anniversary because someone had tried the handle on her back door. Daniel left the restaurant before dessert. The police found no sign of attempted entry. A neighbor later admitted he had mistaken her door for his after drinking too much. When Daniel came home, I was already in bed. He sat on the edge of the mattress and said, "Thanks for understanding." That sentence followed us through our marriage. Thanks for understanding why Olivia needs me tonight. Thanks for understanding why I gave her a key to our garage. Thanks for understanding why she is coming on the family camping trip. She does not like being alone around the anniversary of Nolan's death. Thanks for understanding why I missed your promotion dinner. Olivia's kitchen outlet sparked, and she was scared. At first I thought understanding made me secure. I did not want to be the jealous wife who competed with a dead man's sister. I knew grief did not follow a clean schedule. I knew survivor's guilt could shape a person for years. But slowly, thanks for understanding stopped being gratitude. It became a decision Daniel made on my behalf. I would understand because I was practical. I would adjust because I could. I would take Lily home alone, cancel the reservation, finish the school project, reschedule the weekend, and explain why Dad had left again. Olivia was frightened, so Daniel went. Rachel was capable, so Rachel waited. The Mercer building had been converted from a textile warehouse into art studios, offices, and small event spaces. My firm had consulted on an earlier renovation, but not the most recent one. I knew the building well enough to recognize its weaknesses. It had thick timber floors, hidden wall cavities, and an old central stairwell that could become a chimney if the smoke control doors failed. Lily's dance school rented space on the 5th floor. The afternoon of the fire, parents had been invited to watch a rehearsal for the spring performance. Daniel was on duty. He promised he would try to stop by if calls were quiet. Olivia rented a photography studio on the 3rd floor. I knew that, but I did not know she would be in the building that day. The first alarm sounded at 4:17 in the afternoon. At first, nobody moved. The dance instructor turned off the music and looked toward the hallway. Someone said they had burned popcorn in the shared kitchen the week before. Another parent laughed. Then I smelled electrical insulation. It has a sharp, bitter odor that is difficult to forget once you know it. I opened the studio door. A thin layer of smoke was already moving along the ceiling. I told everyone, "Leave your bags, we are going now." Some parents listened. Others wanted to find coats and phones. One woman went back for her daughter's costume. I pulled the manual alarm beside the exit and called 911 like the dance teacher lined up the children. The main stairwell was already hazy but still passable. We started down at the 4th floor landing. Someone opened a door below us. A wave of black smoke rolled up the stairs so fast that the first children screamed. The fire was not below us where the alarm panel indicated. It had spread through a concealed shaft and broken into the 3rd floor corridor. We could not go down. The secondary stair door would not open. Later, investigators discovered that renovation workers had installed an electronic access control that failed locked when the local power circuit went down. It should have released. It did not. I had 12 children and 7 adults around me. I told the teacher to take the group back to the 5th floor dance studio, seal the door, and wait at the windows. The studio had exterior windows firefighters could reach with ground ladders. Lily grabbed my hand. "You're coming, right?" Before I could answer, the building maintenance supervisor, Mr. Alvarez, came through a service corridor. He said 3 people from the 6th floor offices were trying to reach the roof, but the roof access door required a key from the 5th floor cabinet. I knew the roof had a small open area separated from the mechanical housing by a rated wall. If the fire stayed below, it could be safer than the smoke-filled stairwell. I sent Lily into the dance studio, then one of the parents shouted that her 6-year-old son was missing. He had followed her when she went back for the costume and become separated in the corridor. I found him crouched behind a copy machine less than 30 feet away. By then, smoke had lowered to my shoulders. I got on my knees, pulled my jacket over his head, and moved toward the dance studio. The ceiling above us cracked. A burning strip of insulation fell between us and the studio door. Mr. Alvarez was shouting from the service corridor. The boy clung to my neck. I could hear children crying on the other side of the smoke, but I could no longer see the studio. I made the decision to go up. Mr. Alvarez unlocked the roof access. I carried the boy. 3 office workers followed us. What I did not know was that Lily had slipped out of the dance studio when she heard someone say I was still in the hallway. She ran after me through the service corridor just before the fire crossed it. When she appeared on the roof, I felt relief and terror at the same time. "I told you to stay with Miss Cara." She was crying. "I couldn't find you." There was no time to argue. Mr. Alvarez pulled the roof door shut behind us. The latch clicked. He tried the handle. It would not reopen. The inside release had been damaged. We were locked on the roof. I called 911 again and gave our exact location. I explained that there were 5 adults, 2 children, and no route back inside. The boy I had found was breathing normally. Lily was coughing but talking. The dispatcher told us to move to the north edge away from the mechanical housing and stay low. At 4:26, the first engine arrived. At 4:28, Daniel arrived as the ranking battalion chief. I did not expect him to personally rescue us. Fire scenes are not movies. Incident commanders do not abandon the command post and run into buildings because their families are inside. Their job is to control resources, track crews, read conditions, and make decisions that protect everyone. I expected him to do that job. Because Lily and I were involved, he also should have disclosed the conflict and transferred the specific rescue priority decision to another chief as soon as one arrived. He did not. The maintenance supervisor had a radio connected to the building security channel. A firefighter handed him a department radio through a brief phone patch so crews could communicate with us. That was how I heard Daniel's voice. "Rachel, can you see flames on the roof?" "Not yet. Smoke is coming through the west vent. Lily is coughing. We have 7 people total. Can everyone walk?" "Yes, but we have no exit." "Stay north. Ladder 7 is coming." His voice was steady. For a few seconds, I felt safe. Then Olivia appeared on the 3rd-floor balcony. She had stayed in her studio too long trying to collect camera equipment. The corridor outside filled with smoke. A firefighter team was approaching her unit from the east stairwell. But she did not know that. She saw Daniel below and screamed his name. "Daniel, please, I can't breathe. Don't leave me here." The radio channel became crowded. An interior captain reported that his team was 1 floor below Olivia and moving toward her. A medic looking at her from the street reported that she was standing shouting clearly and not showing signs of collapse. The dispatcher told Daniel that Ladder 7 was approaching the north side for the roof rescue. Then Olivia shouted, "You promised Nolan." Those 3 words changed him. I could not see Daniel's face from the roof, but people who stood beside him later described it. He looked up at Olivia, then toward the north roof line where Lily and I were waiting. He lifted his radio. "Send Ladder 7 to the south balcony first." Deputy Chief Harris answered from another vehicle. "Daniel, hold that assignment. North roof has a child and no interior access. South has a crew approaching." Daniel said, "Olivia has severe smoke exposure and a trauma history. Get her down now. Do you have a medic assessment?" "I can see her condition." The dispatcher asked him to confirm. He did. The ladder truck turned south. Lily heard it happen. Everyone on the roof did. She asked why her father was helping Olivia first. I told her, "He thinks she is in more danger." "Is she?" I looked at the smoke pushing harder through the vent housing. I don't know, but I did know. Olivia was frightened. Fear mattered. Smoke inhalation mattered. She deserved rescue. She was also on an open balcony with clear air around her, able to stand and shout. An interior team was less than 2 minutes away. We were 7 people on a locked roof with fire moving through the structure below us. The ladder reached Olivia at 4:36. She would not climb down alone. Daniel allowed a firefighter to ascend and secure her in a rescue harness. It took almost 6 minutes. While we waited, the wind shifted. Smoke rolled across the roof. I moved everyone behind a concrete mechanical wall and told them to cover their mouths. Mr. Alvarez had a ring of keys and a small pry bar. We tried the roof door again. The metal around the latch had warped from heat. Lily's cough became weaker. That frightened me more than when it had been loud. I kept asking her questions. "What did you have for lunch?" "Pizza." "What color was your dance ribbon?" "Blue." "What are we doing Saturday?" She did not answer. I touched her face. Her eyes were open but unfocused. I radioed, "North roof child becoming altered. We need extraction now." Deputy Chief Harris answered, not Daniel. "Rachel, Rescue 4 is coming through the east stair. 3 minutes. Keep her low. The ladder truck had begun retracting from Olivia's balcony. It still had to reposition around parked vehicles to reach our side. We did not have 3 minutes. I looked at the roof plan in my memory. During the old renovation, a service access hatch had connected the north roof to a narrow mechanical platform above the neighboring building. The hatch was supposed to be sealed during later work, but I had seen a contractor photograph suggesting it might still exist behind a metal panel. Mr. Alvarez and I searched through smoke until we found the outline. We used his pry bar to pull the panel loose. Behind it was a narrow maintenance passage, barely 3 feet high. I pushed the missing boy through first with one office worker, then the other adults crawled. Mr. Alvarez stayed behind to help me with Lily. She could no longer crawl. I wrapped both arms around her chest and dragged her through the passage while Mr. Alvarez pushed from behind. The metal floor burned through my pants. Somewhere behind us, glass exploded. The passage ended on the neighboring roof, 1 story lower. Firefighters from Rescue 4 reached us there. The last thing I remember was placing Lily into a firefighter's arms and saying, "She was talking 2 minutes ago." Then my knees gave out. Lily and I were taken to the hospital. Her carbon monoxide level was high enough that doctors considered transferring her for hyperbaric treatment, but oxygen therapy worked quickly. She spent 1 night in pediatric intensive care and 2 more nights under observation. I had smoke inhalation, burns on both knees, and a fractured wrist from pulling the roof panel open. The boy I found recovered, so did everyone else from the roof. Olivia was treated in the emergency department for mild smoke inhalation and a panic attack. She was released the same evening. Daniel came to Lily's room after midnight. His uniform smelled like smoke. There was dried blood on one sleeve that did not belong to him. He stood in the doorway and looked at our daughter sleeping beneath an oxygen mask. "Is she going to be okay?" I said. "The doctor thinks so." He sat down hard in the chair beside the wall. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I thought the interior team would reach you. You sent the interior team toward Olivia. Another team was going to the roof. After you moved the ladder." He rubbed both hands over his face. She was panicking. She couldn't follow instructions. Lily stopped responding. "I didn't know that would happen." I looked at him. "You knew she was coughing. You knew we had no exit. Your dispatcher told you where the greater risk was. Harris told you. The interior captain told you Olivia had a team approaching." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "When she said Nolan's name, you went back 11 years. He nodded. "And you left your daughter in the present." He flinched as if I had struck him. "Rachel, don't say it like that. How should I say it?" He looked at Lily. "Nolan died saving me. I made a promise." I had heard that sentence in different forms for 9 years. That night, for the first time, it did not make me feel compassionate. It made me tired. "You promised his mother you would look out for Olivia," I said. "You did not promise to put her ahead of every person you would ever love." I never meant to put her ahead of Lily. Intent doesn't move a ladder truck. Decisions do. He lowered his head. I asked him to leave before Lily woke up. The fire department opened an internal review the next morning. Because the incident involved a child, a ranking officer's family, a civilian with a personal relationship to that officer, and an override of dispatch priority, the city brought in an outside investigator. Daniel wanted to explain everything to me before I saw the reports. I refused. For years I had accepted his explanation first and the facts second. This time I wanted the facts in the order they existed. My friend Monica was an attorney who handled municipal liability cases. She helped me request the dispatch recordings, incident timeline, body camera footage, radio traffic, and building safety reports. The timeline was worse than I remembered. At 4:31, the dispatcher marked the north roof rescue as the aerial ladder's first priority. At 4:32, the interior captain reported that his team was 2 floors below Olivia and had a clear approach. At 4:33, a street medic observed Olivia standing on the balcony, speaking in full sentences. At 4:34, Daniel ordered Ladder 7 to change sides. At 4:35, Deputy Chief Harris told him the reassignment was inconsistent with the current risk report. At 4:36, Daniel confirmed it anyway. The investigator asked him why. Daniel's answer appeared in the transcript. "I knew Olivia would not remain functional if the conditions worsened. Rachel is trained. She knows buildings. She stays calm." I read those words 3 times. He knew Olivia, so her fear increased her priority. He knew me, so my ability reduced mine. He knew Lily too. He knew she trusted him more than anyone in the world. Somehow, in the moment that mattered, he treated my competence as if it extended to an 8-year-old child breathing smoke. The department's behavioral health consultant explained something during the review. Daniel had never processed Nolan's death as fully as everyone believed. Each time Olivia panicked, Daniel experienced a version of the old warehouse fire, helping her temporarily relieve his guilt. Over time, the relief became a pattern. Olivia's fear did not just call for his help, it gave him a chance to feel that he had finally repaid Nolan. I understood the explanation. Understanding it did not make it safe. Olivia contacted me a week after the fire. She asked to meet in the hospital cafeteria while Lily attended a follow-up appointment. Her hands shook when she sat down. "I never asked Daniel to leave you on the roof," she said. "You reminded him of Nolan while he was making the decision." She looked down. "I thought I was going to die." "Did you hear the firefighter outside your studio door?" She hesitated. That was the answer. You knew a crew was coming. I could hear them, but I couldn't see them. I was terrified. "I believe you." She looked surprised. I continued. "I believe you were terrified. I also believe you knew what saying Nolan's name would do to Daniel. Both things can be true." Tears ran down her face. After Nolan died, everyone moved on. My mother moved to Arizona. Daniel got married. You had Lily? I know that sounds selfish, but when I called Daniel, he came. It made me feel like Nolan had not completely disappeared. "So you kept calling?" She nodded. "And every time he came, someone else paid for it." I didn't think about it that way. I know. Neither did he. I did not hate Olivia. She had lived inside grief for 11 years and learned that panic brought Daniel back, but she was not helpless. She had benefited from a pattern and protected it. Daniel had done the same. The investigation lasted nearly 4 months. The building owner was cited for the failed stair release, unapproved electrical work, and blocked fire doors. The contractor responsible for the access system lost its city license. Those failures caused the fire to become much more dangerous. But the report was also clear about Daniel. He had allowed a personal relationship and unresolved trauma to influence operational judgment. He had overridden a documented rescue priority without new medical or structural evidence. He had failed to transfer the decision despite a conflict involving his wife, child, and former partner. Daniel was removed from battalion command for 1 year. He returned to a training assignment and was required to complete counseling, incident command review, and ethics remediation before becoming eligible for field leadership again. He did not lose his pension. He was not fired. His entire life did not collapse. But the promotion he had been expecting disappeared. More importantly, he lost the certainty that being a good man automatically made every decision he made defensible. I moved out before the review ended. Daniel asked me not to make a permanent decision while Lily was still recovering. I told him, "I'm not leaving because I'm emotional. I'm leaving because for the first time I'm not explaining away what happened." He asked for counseling. I agreed to attend, but not as a promise of reconciliation. I wanted us to learn how to co-parent Lily without making her responsible for the end of our marriage. During one session, Daniel said, "I chose wrong one time." I looked at him. The latter was one time. The rule behind it existed for years. I reminded him of Lily's concert, our anniversary, my promotion dinner, the camping trip, the nights Olivia called because she was frightened. None of those were emergencies, he said. That's the point. You practiced putting a second when the cost was small. When the cost became enormous, the choice already felt normal to you. That was the moment he stopped defending himself. He began to cry. I cried too. Love does not disappear the instant trust does. Sometimes that is what makes leaving so painful. I still remembered the man who slept beside Lily's bed when she had pneumonia. I remembered cold coffee outside the burned school. I remembered him testing me for my engineering exam and celebrating when I passed. Those memories were real. So was the radio call. We divorced quietly. Daniel did not fight me over money or custody. We agreed that Lily would live primarily with me while he completed counseling and adjusted to his new assignment. Over time, his visits became longer. He never missed another school performance at first. That made me angry. Part of me wanted to ask why losing us had been required before he learned to show up. Eventually, I understood that his improvement belonged to Lily. It did not have to repair our marriage to be worthwhile. Olivia moved out of the Mercer building and left Portland the following year. Before she went, she wrote me a letter. She said she had started trauma therapy and had finally stopped using Daniel as her emergency plan. I did not answer, but I hoped she meant it. My own recovery was slower than I expected. For months, the smell of overheated wiring made my heart race. I could not stand in a locked stairwell. Lily refused to enter any building higher than 4 stories unless she could see 2 exits. We went to therapy separately and together. One afternoon, Lily asked whether her father had loved Olivia more than he loved us. I wanted to give her a simple answer. Children deserve simple answers when adults can honestly provide them. This time, I could not. I said, "Your dad loved us. He also had a fear he never learned how to manage. That fear made him make a dangerous choice. Can somebody love you and still choose wrong? Yes. Then how do you know if love is safe?" I thought about that question for a long time. You watch what someone does when 2 things matter at the same time, I said. Love is not only how people treat you when helping you is easy. After the fire, my firm was hired to review emergency systems in several older converted buildings. I almost declined. The Mercer report was public, and I worried people would think I was using what happened to build my career. Then Mr. Alvarez called me. He had recovered from his injuries and returned to work in another building. He said, "You knew where that service passage was because somebody once bothered to look at an old plan? If your work keeps one family from standing where we stood, do it." So I did. I helped develop a city program for secondary egress inspections in renovated industrial buildings. We trained owners to test fail-safe locks, keep fire doors clear, and update responder maps. Nothing about it was dramatic. Most safety work is invisible when it succeeds. 2 years after the fire, the city opened a new training center with a full-scale mock apartment building. Daniel was invited to teach a session on command bias. He asked my permission before using an anonymous version of the Mercer incident. That mattered. Not enough to bring us back together, but enough for me to see that he was learning to ask before taking something from our story. He told new officers, the calm person may be calm because they are trained. That does not reduce their risk. Familiarity is not assessment. Gratitude is not triage. And if your personal history enters the decision, transfer the decision. When I heard that, I felt something loosen inside me. I did not feel regret about the divorce. I did not imagine another life where I forgave him and we returned to the house we had shared. I simply felt relieved that the worst decision of his career might prevent someone else from repeating it. I did not remarry quickly. For a long time, I did not date at all. My life was full with Lily, work, therapy, friends, and the ordinary work of becoming someone who no longer apologized for needing things. I had spent years believing strength meant making myself easy to leave. If Daniel was called away, I handled dinner. If Olivia needed him, I swallowed my disappointment. If I felt afraid, I reminded myself that other people had suffered more. After the fire, I learned that comparing pain does not make anyone safer. 3 years later, I met Marcus Lee at a school safety workshop. He was an emergency room nurse and the father of a girl in Lily's middle school class. We worked on the same parent committee for 6 months before he asked me to have coffee. Before Marcus and I ever went to dinner, I had to learn how to ask for help without turning the request into an apology. The first winter after the divorce, an ice storm knocked out power in my neighborhood. Daniel was working. Lily and I had blankets, flashlights, and enough food, so my first instinct was to tell everyone we were fine. The temperature inside the house kept falling. Lily's lips began to look pale. My neighbor, Mrs. Patel, texted that her family had a generator and a warm guest room. I typed, "We're okay, but thank you." Then I looked at Lily wearing 2 coats at the kitchen table. I deleted the message. I wrote, "We need somewhere warm tonight. Can we come over?" Mrs. Patel answered, "Of course." Nobody praised me for enduring the cold. Nobody thought less of me for needing a room. The emergency became smaller because I had told the truth before it became dangerous. That sounds obvious. It was not obvious to me then. For years, I had waited until a problem became undeniable before asking anyone to change their plans for me. Part of rebuilding was learning that my needs did not become legitimate only after I collapsed. Lily learned the same lesson in her own way. At school, she began having panic attacks during fire drills. She tried to hide them because she did not want teachers to think she was difficult. When I discovered that she had been locking herself in a bathroom afterward, I told her, "Being brave does not mean nobody is allowed to know you're scared." We created a plan with the school counselor. Lily could stand near the front of the evacuation line, hold a small breathing card, and meet one designated adult outside. After several months, she no longer needed the plan. The goal was never to prove she could handle fear alone. The goal was to give her enough support that fear stopped making every decision. On our third date, his former wife called because their daughter had forgotten a science project at his house, Marcus answered. He listened, then he looked at me and said, "She needs me to leave it on the porch before 7. Is it okay if we stop there after dinner?" The question caught me off guard. He was not asking permission to care for his child. He was including me in a change to our plan. I said yes. He looked at my face for another second. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Okay, if that changes, tell me." It was a small moment. No one would call it romantic. For me, it was. Marcus and I moved slowly. He never promised he would always choose me first. I would not have trusted that promise anyway. Life is more complicated than rankings. Children, patients, parents, work, and partners can all need us at the same time. What he promised was that he would not decide my needs did not matter simply because I could survive without immediate help. That was enough. 5 years after the Mercer fire, Lily and I returned to the building site. The original structure had been demolished. In its place was a public courtyard and a smaller, fully sprinklered community arts center. There were 2 enclosed stairs, exterior rescue windows, and roof access doors that released from both sides. Lily was 13. She stood beside the memorial plaque for the fire and read every name listed under civilians assisted in evacuation. Mine was there. Mr. Alvarez's was too. She asked, "Do you ever think about the latter?" "Sometimes." "I do too." I waited. She said, "Dad told me he was wrong." "He didn't say he was confused, he said he was wrong. I'm glad he told you that. Are you still mad at him?" I looked across the courtyard. Children were carrying paint boxes into the new building. A teacher held the door while parents followed. "Not the way I used to be," I said, "but not being angry anymore doesn't mean I wish I had stayed." Lily nodded as if that made sense. Maybe it did to her. She had grown up watching 2 parents learn that forgiveness and reunion were not the same thing. For years, Daniel believed Nolan's sacrifice created a debt he could never finish paying. Olivia believed that debt gave her a permanent claim on him. I believed being compassionate meant accepting whatever that claim cost me. All 3 of us were wrong. Gratitude is real, loyalty is real, promises matter, but you cannot honor one promise by quietly breaking every promise that came after it. Nolan died saving Daniel. That sacrifice deserved to be remembered. It did not require Daniel to risk his wife and child 11 years later. It did not require Olivia to remain frightened forever. It did not require me to make myself smaller so grief could keep controlling our marriage. The lesson I carried from that roof was not that I should have screamed louder than Olivia. I do not want love to become a contest where the most visibly broken person wins. The lesson was that a person's calmness is not proof that they can wait. Their competence is not extra time you're allowed to spend elsewhere. Their history of surviving disappointment is not permission to disappoint them again. Strong people still need to be considered before they collapse. Quiet people still need someone to look at the facts. And love is not measured only by who you run toward when one person is crying. Sometimes it is measured by whether you can stand in the middle of old guilt, new fear, and competing needs, and still see the people who trusted you to make a fair decision. Daniel did not see us clearly that day. He saw Nolan's warehouse. He saw Olivia's fear. He saw 11 years of guilt. By the time he saw Lily on the hospital bed, the choice had already been made. I could not undo it. I could only decide what I would do with the truth it showed me. I chose not to spend the rest of my life proving I was strong enough to survive being placed last. I chose a life where I could say, "I need you," without feeling selfish. I chose to teach my daughter that love can be genuine and still not be safe enough to stay inside. And I chose to believe that leaving was not a punishment for Daniel. It was protection for me. The day of the fire, I pulled Lily through a narrow metal passage because no ladder was coming for us yet. For a long time, I thought that was the moment I saved us. Now I know it was only the first time. I saved us again when I stopped calling a pattern of neglect an act of loyalty. I saved us when I refused to let guilt write the rules of our home, and I saved myself when I finally understood that being capable of surviving alone does not mean I should build a life with someone who always assumes I will.